Imagine a world where silence is power, where no wires hum, no screens glow, yet entire civilizations thrived with precision, comfort, and resilience. And this is where part two begins. Because what medieval engineers mastered without electricity will genuinely change how you see the modern world forever. Picture gravity-powered water clocks that measured time with shocking accuracy centuries before digital seconds existed, or medieval hypercaust heating systems that silently pushed warm air beneath stone floors, heating entire castles more efficiently than many modern homes today. Think about wind catchers towering over desert cities, pulling cool air down into homes and pushing hot air out using nothing but pressure and physics. A technology so effective that architects are now desperately trying to rediscover it for green buildings. Then there were mechanical alarm clocks driven by falling weights that rang bells at exact moments, irrigation canals engineered with such perfect slope calculations that water traveled miles without pumps, and medieval cranes powered by human walking wheels that lifted stones heavier than trucks, using pure mechanical advantage. They built self-regulating grain mills that adjusted flow automatically, fermentation cellars that controlled temperature year-round without ice or power, and underground ice houses that preserved food through entire summers using insulation, airflow, and earth itself as a battery. Even medieval hospitals used passive ventilation, sunlight positioning, and acoustic, designed to heal patients faster. Concepts modern architecture is only now proving scientifically. Siege engineers created counterweight trebuchets, so mathematically precise they could hit targets repeatedly with terrifying consistency. While blacksmiths used charcoal chemistry and airflow control to reach temperatures modern hobby forges still struggle to match, cities were designed for walkability, natural drainage, flood resistance, and waste recycling long before sustainability became a buzzword. And perhaps most shocking of all, many of these technologies disappeared not because they failed, but because cheap energy made humanity lazy. This is not nostalgia, this is a warning and a revelation. Because as power grids strain, resources vanish, and sustainability becomes survival, the so-called Dark Ages suddenly look brighter than ever. And once you realize that medieval people solved comfort, efficiency, health, and engineering with nothing but observation, patience, and physics, one terrifying question remains. If they could do all this without electricity, what have we forgotten that could save us next? Because once you cross that threshold of understanding, there is no going back, and the deeper we dig into these forgotten medieval technologies, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Medieval societies were not primitive, they were optimized for reality, for scarcity, for failure, for a world where systems had to work every single day or people died. Consider medieval roads layered with stone, gravel, and sand, crowned perfectly so rainwater escaped naturally, lasting centuries longer than modern asphalt that collapses within decades, or monasteries designed as self-sustaining machines, where food production, water flow, waste recycling, heating, and medicine all functioned together without a single external input. Think of medieval lenses and early optics that allowed surgeons and scholars to see microscopic details long before electricity-powered microscopes existed, or tide mills that harvested the moon's gravity itself, turning ocean movement into mechanical energy with zero fuel cost. There were smoke-free kitchens using draft control and chimney geometry, sound-based communication systems in castles that carried whispers across stone corridors, and passive refrigeration chambers carved into hillsides that kept meat fresh longer than modern fridges during power outages. Armorers engineered layered materials that distributed impact energy better than some modern composites, while shipbuilders created hull shapes so hydrodynamically efficient that many are still copied today. Even medieval bookkeeping systems tracked inventories, labor, and logistics, with accuracy rivaling spreadsheets, proving intelligence was never dependent on electricity, only discipline, and perhaps most haunting is how knowledge was transmitted through apprenticeship, muscle memory, and lived experience, not fragile servers or cloud storage, meaning skills survived wars, plagues, and collapses while our digital knowledge might vanish in a single blackout. Every one of these inventions whispers the same brutal lesson, that technology does not mean electricity, progress does not mean complexity, and convenience is not the same as resilience. As modern society races forward on a fragile web of power grids, rare minerals, and centralized systems, medieval technology stands like a quiet shadow behind us, asking whether our future should really be built on systems that fail the moment the lights go out. And when you realize that these forgotten solutions weren't accidents, but the result of generations refining what actually worked, the story stops being about the past and becomes a mirror held up to our present. Because the next great technological revolution may not come from inventing something new, but from remembering what we were once wise enough to never need electricity for in the first place. And now, as this journey reaches its most unsettling point, everything comes together into one unavoidable realization. Medieval technology was not about comfort alone, it was about survival intelligence, systems built to endure collapse, invasion, famine, and total isolation. Systems that assumed failure and still worked. Entire towns were designed so that water flowed. Even if one channel broke, food could be stored underground for years without spoilage. Heat could be generated from earth, animals, and human movement. And tools could be repaired locally without factories or global supply chains. Bells coordinated labor, prayer, emergencies, and timekeeping across miles without a single wire, while symbols carved into stone transmitted warnings, laws, and knowledge to generations yet unborn. Forests were managed as renewable resources centuries before environmental science existed, and craftsmanship followed strict rules not because of tradition, but because deviation meant death when materials were scarce. Medieval people understood airflow, pressure, insulation, fermentation, leverage, rotation, rhythm, and gravity so deeply that their buildings breathed. Their machines listened to nature, and their cities behaved like living organisms. And here lies the most dangerous truth of all. Modern society believes it is advanced because it is fast, but medieval society was advanced because it was stable. Today, one solar flare, one cyber attack, one grid failure can silence hospitals, food systems, communication, and transport in hours. Yet medieval life could continue in darkness, cold, and isolation because nothing essential depended on invisible power. This is why these technologies were forgotten, not because they failed, but because electricity allowed shortcuts, and shortcuts erased wisdom. So when you hear the phrase Dark Ages, remember this: darkness never stopped them, ignorance never defined them, and electricity was never required for brilliance. The real question is no longer how they lived without power, but whether we still remember how to live when power disappears, because history has shown again and again that civilizations don't collapse when technology is simple. They collapse when it becomes fragile, and if this knowledge was once enough to build the world, then perhaps reclaiming it is the only way we prevent losing ours. And if that thought unsettles you, it should, because the final layer of this story exposes something even deeper. Medieval technology was not isolated inventions, it was a mindset, a way of thinking where every solution respected limits, where energy was borrowed from nature instead of stolen from the future, and where resilience mattered more than speed. People understood that tools must outlive their makers, that buildings must serve generations, that systems must function even when everything goes wrong, and this is why so many medieval structures still stand. While modern ones crumble in a single lifetime, wells were placed with geological intelligence, streets angled to catch winter sun and deflect summer heat, windows sized not for views but for thermal balance, and communities organized so skills overlapped. If one craftsman died, knowledge did not die with him. Contrast this with today, where specialization is so extreme that the failure of one tiny component can shut down entire nations, where food travels thousands of miles while soil dies beneath our feet, and where we mistake technological noise for progress. Medieval engineers never chased novelty, they chased reliability, and that is why they're obsolete. Machines are now being studied by scientists, architects, and survival planners as blueprints for a future beyond cheap energy. This is not about rejecting modern life, it is about confronting its weakness. Because the medieval world proves that human ingenuity does not require endless power, rare minerals, or digital control. It requires understanding reality as it is. And so, when you look at these 12 forgotten technologies, don't see relics, see warnings, see backups written in stone and wood and water, waiting patiently for the moment we realize that the smartest civilizations are not the ones that shine brightest, but the ones that can keep going when everything goes dark. And that is where the story finally turns from history into prophecy, because once you truly absorb what these medieval technologies represent, you begin to see the modern world with unsettling clarity. We have built a civilization that dazzles when conditions are perfect, yet panics the moment they are not. while medieval societies assumed hardship as the default state and engineered life around that assumption. Every mill, cellar, hearth, aqueduct, and workshop was a quiet agreement with nature, rather than a declaration of war against it. And that agreement is why their systems aged gracefully instead of catastrophically. They accepted slow processes because slow processes are stable. They valued redundancy because redundancy saves lives. And they trusted physical laws because gravity, airflow, and water pressure never crash, never update, never betray you. Even their social technologies, guilds, commons, shared ovens, communal wells, were designed to distribute risk so no single failure destroyed the whole. A concept modern networks talk about endlessly yet rarely achieve, and now, standing at the edge of a future defined by energy limits, climate strain, and systemic fragility, these forgotten solutions no longer feel old, they feel inevitable, like messages sent forward in time by people who understood that civilizations rise not by how much power they consume, but by how wisely they use the little they have. So when this series ends and the screen goes dark, the question it leaves behind is deliberately uncomfortable. If medieval humanity could build warmth, health, food security, engineering precision, and cultural continuity without electricity, global supply chains, or digital control, then perhaps the real failure of our age is not technological weakness, but the loss of the patience, humility, and foresight that once made true progress possible. And maybe, just maybe, the future does not belong to those who invent the most complex machines, but to those who remember how to live when machines fall silent. And yet, even that conclusion is not the end, because the most haunting part of this knowledge is what it implies about choice. Medieval people did not stumble into resilience by accident. They chose it again and again, generation after generation, refining what worked and discarding what failed. Even when the slower path demanded more discipline and patience, they understood that true technology is not something you plug in, but something you can explain, repair, and pass on with your own hands, which is why a millstone could outlive empires and a wooden water wheel could serve a village for centuries without ever becoming obsolete. Compare that to our present moment, where innovation races so fast that nothing is meant to last, where devices are sealed, dependent, and disposable, and where knowledge lives behind paywalls, patents, and servers that can vanish overnight. Medieval systems were open source before the word existed. Anyone could see how they worked, learn them, improve them, and teach them, making society itself stronger with every generation. This is why these forgotten technologies feel almost threatening today, because they expose a truth we rarely want to face, that progress measured only in speed and convenience is not progress at all if it cannot survive stress. And so, as this part of the story fades out, what remains is not admiration for the past, but responsibility for the future. Because the wisdom hidden in these medieval solutions is not asking us to abandon modern life. It is warning us not to build a world with no backup, no memory, and no patience. If electricity vanished tomorrow, these technologies would still whisper instructions through stone walls, wind towers, root cellars, gravity-fed water, and human cooperation, reminding us that humanity once thrived in silence and could do so again, if we are brave enough to relearn what we are supposed to forget. And at this point, the message becomes impossible to ignore, because what medieval technology ultimately reveals is not how far we've come, but how narrowly we've defined intelligence itself. We equated smart with fast, powerful, automated, and infinite, while medieval minds defined smart as durable, repairable, teachable, and forgiving of failure. And that difference may decide which civilizations survive the next century. Their tools were slow by design, because speed breaks systems, but steadiness preserves them. And their world was built so that a bad year did not become a death sentence for an entire society. Even mistakes were survivable, because nothing depended on a single fragile chain of power, data, or fuel. This is why plagues, wars, ice ages, and famines did not erase human knowledge, because the knowledge was embedded in daily life, in how to stack stone, guide water, read wind, store food, and share labor. Modern society, for all its brilliance, has externalized that wisdom into machines we barely understand and systems we cannot fix. And that is the silent danger medieval technology exposes. So when we look back at these 12 forgotten inventions, we are not looking at curiosities. We are looking at insurance policies, written in wood, earth, and physics, waiting for the moment when complexity collapses under its own weight. And maybe that is why this topic feels so compelling, so unsettling, so impossible to scroll past. Because deep down, we recognize that the future will not reward those who consume the most energy, but those who can do the most with the least, just as medieval people did. And when the lights flicker, the servers fail, and the noise finally stops, it will not be the newest technology that carries humanity forward, but the oldest wisdom quietly waiting beneath our feet, unchanged, undefeated, and still working, without electricity.